Hello, everyone, and welcome to Smashbox TV's podcast 356. Terry Miller, the Disc Golf Guy, along with Johnny V. All right, folks.
Okay, fine.
All right, tonight, special edition podcast coming to you a little early before we catch up with our 2021 PDGA World Champions. But this is a little bit special and unique because there's been some storylines from both the PDGA Worlds, exciting ones. There's also been a few challenges that have existed. And then also, kind of coinciding with that, there's been some criticisms and some challenges, we'll say, within the PDGA and some of the management, some of the...
The PDGA's been eating it on social media. I mean...
They haven't been in the best light. That's why we needed sunglasses. No.
Very well done.
In all
well
honesty, that's not exactly how it's going down. But what we're here tonight, we're going to check in with Nate Heinold, who's on the PDGA board. We're going to have him in just a few moments. And we really wanted to take this kind of special occasion to get to the bottom of some stuff. There's a lot of things happening. Again, some really good, some okay, some really bad. There's a little bit of everything. It's not a secret. Johnny and I are longtime PDGA members.
And supporters.
I'm 10-7-3-8. Johnny is 14-3-2-1.
14-3-2-4.
14-3-2-4. Sorry, Ryan Hornicle. Calling him out. So we've been members for more than 20 years. However, there's still, understandably, even as long-term members and supporters, it's fair that the organization of which we're all part of gets either scrutinized or examined or investigated into and praise and accolades. There's a little bit of everything that can happen from the PDGA side. And so with that, we reached out, and Nate Heinold was gracious enough to let us maybe put his feet to the fire or let him speak, hopefully, on behalf of the PDGA in terms of a few of the questions and maybe more so the clarifications that I think that are largely needed because we have a lot of members, current or not, that are worked up, that are frustrated, that aren't feeling heard, aren't feeling validated. And we have a lot of members that are very happy. But
Yep.
We're going to try to do our best here tonight to kind of bridge that gap and hopefully get to the bottom of some of these more recent challenges. Did I set that up all right?
I think you did.
All right. Well, then, without further ado, we're going to bring in Nate Heinold. Hey, Nate.
What's going on, gentlemen?
Well, we just
Don't
thought
sound so somber.
that in order to have a PDGA representative on, we had to wear sunglasses. But I guess that's not the case because we've had you on before. We've had Justin Manikelli on before. We've never worn sunglasses. So,
Yes. So let me just, before you even go on with that, Nate, I know I've done a lot of talking already, but one of the biggest things that came about in the last week or so, Justin Manikelli, our PDGA board president, had gone onto a podcast. I believe it's called Frolfer Magazine. Frolf Center. And they, as a group, as I went back and looked at a number of their other podcasts, they wear sunglasses. That's their thing.
it's like a shtick. Kind of.
Yeah, and it's
I've watched an episode or two of theirs in the past when the PDGA, when IT was on there. I was extremely it was a very good interview with what was going on. And no shade on them, pun intended.
Hey.
Just
We wanted to, first of all, put that to rest, though, because even myself, when I first saw that, I was like, why are they wearing sunglasses? And then realizing that that's no different than us yelling after show every time we have an after show. That's just part of their overall podcast. So we wanted to, put that one out there right off the bat, and I applaud them for being unique in that way. So my first question to you, though, we're going to get right into it, Nate. Why are we talking to you and not Justin? Because some would say that he should be here kind of getting his feet held to the fire. Yeah.
Well, I'm not just here to talk about, Justin and that kind of stuff. It's more of the pro worlds, and I'm hearing my voice a lot here. It's an echo for some reason, Johnny. So
Let's see if we can.
I don't like my voice that much. So, but so I would say, I'm the chair of the majors committee. I'm the vice president of the board of directors. I'm better at looking at Justin as well. But I would say in general, I probably could speak more to the world's issues, and I'm sure Justin could speak more to the Justin situation. But I certainly can address all of that.
Okay. Well, are you still having an echo problem, by the way?
I am.
I should be.
We're gonna see if there's anything.
I don't believe there's anything.
You're sure you're fully
side.
plugged in with your headphones and everything's coming through that way to you?
I am.
I mean, if this is a problem, real simple. You do also have a Facebook message that you can end on. We can end the Skype interview, end this early, and you can jump on the other method via a web browser, which is what we've been using the last 2 weeks, and it seems to work out pretty well. So,
I mean, I can hear fine. So
okay.
Well, all right.
So, well, yeah, thank you. And of course, you've been a Worlds Tournament Director, obviously in 2019, and then you've been hosting the Ledgestone Insurance Open, which has grown exponentially over the last 10 years. I know you're looking forward to having a big event this upcoming year. So some of the things that we get to will be a little bit more world specific in terms of the conversations that cycled around or circled around what we saw at the World Championships. Again, a lot of positives, and then probably a few instances where there were some challenges. But let's start with when someone like yourself or an Elaine King or a Justin Manikelli or a Joe Chargoloff or whomever, when any of our board representatives or PDGA representatives jump onto a podcast, is there a fine line of where they are personally speaking versus when they're speaking as a representative of the PDGA?
yeah, generally I've come on, this show, we'll just say a half dozen times since inception, and generally it's been as the TD of an event, right? Worlds or Ledgestone. So I've never really come on this show to put on my PDGA hat, maybe except for one time to discuss the Champions Cup. So in this instance here, I think it's important for me to say I'm speaking on behalf of the PDGA and the organization, the staff, and the board. And so, yeah, it is a fine line because we're a very diverse board of directors. I'm probably the youngest at 35, and there's some members that have been around longer than me, certainly. We have people from Europe, and we have females, and we have males, and we have very diverse backgrounds, diverse opinions. Sometimes those opinions spill into the public light. Most of the time they don't. So I don't remember Justin really, spilling his opinion on that kind of topic publicly in the last 4 years as president. And, I try to keep my mouth shut most of the time, and, I don't. But in this case, I'm speaking on behalf of the PDGA, and I'm not going to give personal opinions except to say that Shirt Terry is, never mind, I'm going to just cut it out.
Fire is the word.
Flowery,
the
flowery,
kids
not
would say.
fire. Flowery.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the audio is better for you now.
It is, yes.
Thanks. Gotcha.
Good.
So that brings me to my first question. You're talking about your position and who you're speaking for. This year, the PDGA put into effect a new rule, and I kind of want to dub it the Shoestrick rule, seeing as how he was the first one really affected by it, that as a board member, you can't be a part owner, I believe, or have stake in a manufacturer or someone who, more or less anyone who gets anything approved by the PDGA. Where does that stand for you? You are a sponsored Discraft team member. You're on the website. You're on the board. And you're a DGPT tournament director.
Sure.
Where is the conflict of interest there? Where do we draw the line at what the PDGA allows? Because I've made my stance clear that I think we're getting to the point, look at how big the sport has, that at some point our board of directors needs to be neutral. Like, that means no sponsorships, probably not running any tournaments, although that's kind of a fine line. Where do we go? Where do we go for that?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Without pulling the policy up, I believe the policy actually would preclude somebody who is an employee or an owner for anyone who submits items to the PDGA for approval. And so that, I believe, is the policy because it would preclude an employee or an owner. But I would say I certainly have a conflict of interest. Elaine King has a conflict of interest. Other board members certainly have had a conflict of interest in the past. When this came up last year, I recused myself from the discussion because I was running for re-election. So I can't actually address all of the reasons why we made that change because I was running for election against Will. But I would say if we did some of the things that you mentioned, Johnny, our board pool would go down significantly, to be honest. And even this year, if you look at who's running, I see several sponsored players and TDs. And at the end of the day, right now, we need people like me and Elaine. And, Mike Sullivan just resigned to become a staff member for the PDGA, but he represented MVP. And so I think if you asked our staff and the rest of our board about Elaine or myself's independence, they would say that it was above reproach and we have not had any issues. At this point in time, the board doesn't really get involved in any kind of manufacturer situations. We don't approve discs anymore. We don't approve targets. We don't approve purchase of discs for member items. And so right now, that has not been a big concern. And to be clear, I'm not an owner of Discraft. I obviously am very close to Discraft. But I've worked with all manufacturers for Worlds and other events. So
I think that's a valid answer. And I've said, I don't know if we're at that point yet. I think we could get to that point. When I had said that, there were, I think, 14 people applying for a board of directors position. And this year it's significantly less. It's what, 7? 8? So we may have seen a little peak there, and maybe I'm premature in that aspect, but I appreciate your candidness.
And I think it's important for especially our touring players and people who are playing our events. The perspective of a tournament director is incredibly important to the strategy of the organization, because if you look at the PDGA, we're very similar to maybe the USGA, where we're the governing body of the sport, and we do run some high-level events, but our bread and butter is running C tiers and running these smaller events. To have the perspective of TDs on the board allows the high level strategy to kind of always keep in mind that at the end of the day, most people join the PDGA to use our product, and that's playing sanctioned events.
Now, what I'd love to do is step into, I know we've kind of started mixing up a few different ideas here,
Sorry.
but no, what I also want to make note of, first and foremost, voting for the 3 available board positions will start in just a couple of days. It starts on, I believe, on July 1st. So I want to get that out there, that, of course, we've got 8 candidates, as we all just mentioned, and we're looking to fill 3 positions. One of those positions will, in fact, be Justin Manikelli, and he was the gentleman that was on the another podcast last week, and so he has fulfilled, I believe, all 6 years, his 2 terms. I think he self-imposed the idea of having a 2-term limit, and so he is at the end of July, I think, is when the term actually ends.
August.
At the end of
August.
Oh, end of August. Thank you. At the end of August, Justin specifically is going to be leaving regardless because his term is up and he's not rerunning. Now, there have been some calls for him to resign now. There's a petition that's circled around out there. I read some of it just today. In fact, there's been some calls. Has there been any board level conversations about either protocols and or a board conversation about what could or should or may not happen at this point?
Do we real quickly just want to quickly recap what the actual offense was that people took, that he went on the pod?
Sure.
He went on the Frolf Center podcast, and there were 2 takeaways that I felt people had. One, that the discussion about Brody and the rental of the driving range, and I believe his exact words were it was a jerk move.
Something in reference
to how it was handled instead of going to the PGA. And then he was talking also about Paige Pierce and her complaints about the coverage of U.S. women's and the courses, the number of them, and basically just the entire setup of USWDGC. Correct? Is that a quick summary?
Yeah, I feel like that was a quick summation. He had, we'll say, less than complimentary. I don't know if that's the right way to word it, but it seemed like he had disparaging remarks to say about both of those players in that regard, which obviously was a public forum that then a lot of attention was drawn to. So with all of that was kind of the impetus of it all. With people calling for a resignation or public apologies, has there been board discussion? And if not, should there be? Will there be?
I would say that in this regard, I think Joe sent me the information because I've gotten some emails. The PDGA has, I believe, close to 90,000 active members now. I believe so far we've received less than 20 emails from our members that have asked, Justin to resign. So as a percentage of our membership, right now we're hearing from a very small minority of our members. And so the board has not discussed removing Justin from the board. And, as you just referenced, if there's a petition, I believe they would need 10% of our membership to sign off on it. And then it would go to a vote of 2/3 of our members that would be required to remove him. So no, the board has not discussed, removing Justin or those kind of protocols.
Okay. So someone I think would follow that up and say the means may not be there, but does the conversation should still happen, maybe, is what I think I would take from that. So
I think the conversation that we are having, and we've had for honestly probably a year and a half, is last year we set aside some procedures for staff and certain committee members and how they conduct themselves and how they represent themselves. If they're a volunteer or a staff member, how are they going to represent the PDGA? And we're working on, and we've been working on a board policy, and Joe does training at summits to make sure the board is, when we're speaking, when I come on your podcast, if I say, something personally, that people know that it's me personally saying that. And so we certainly, with a new board coming on, we're going to have at least 2 new board members because only one is running for re-election. We're going to be, I think, putting in some additional procedures to make sure that all board members, because I'm sure I've come on certain interviews and conveyed a message without going through the proper channels to make sure I've spoken to the media team or Joe to make sure we're on the same page. So certainly in the future, I think we'll have some kind of policy to make sure that we're being very clear if I'm speaking, that I'm speaking on behalf of the board or I'm speaking on behalf of a tournament director or a member of Team Discraft or a father or whatever it is. And so we have talked, and we will talk at our summit next month about that kind of issue.
I do want to follow this up because I also want to be very clear that our point of this is not simply to have any form of just a straight up bash session to any party or person or anything of that nature. We're trying to get some answers and we're trying to get to the bottom of things. Every interaction that I've personally had with Justin Manikelli over the last 6 years have been positive. He's been on our show a number of times. I've talked to him outside of our show also a number of times after board meetings, at big events, and he's always been delightful. Nothing but positive. He's always been great to talk to. He's written a book on disc golf and so on and so forth. So I want to personally say that. Now, I think the challenge just becomes, and this could be said of any 3 of us, plus hundreds watching or thousands that will view this, if you have a personal opinion, you just have to be careful when you're sharing that personal opinion. I think all 3 of us obviously have our own personal opinions, but when you're in a certain situation, it's just a matter of when are you sharing that actual opinion and what does it represent?
Exactly. Go ahead.
And to be clear, I think I'm not going to speak on behalf of Justin, obviously, but at the end of the day, that was Justin's personal opinion, right? I think if he didn't make that clear in the interview, because I didn't watch the full interview, I just saw the short clip. If he didn't make that clear, I think he would tell anybody, yeah, that was my personal opinion. That is not the opinion of the PDJ staff and board. The PDJ staff and board, in terms of Paige Pierce, she's a 5-time world champion. She's a very passionate and fierce competitor, and the best, if not the best, one of the best female competitors of all time, member in good standing. We value her feedback. Brody is obviously bringing a lot of attention to disc golf, and we're certainly appreciative of him pushing the needle out there. And so that's the organizational's perspective on Brody and Paige.
Yeah, Yeah, I just keep going back to for me, it's all about, I have a lot of personal opinions, some of which I'll share privately, Johnny or yourself. It's just a matter of is there something rolling, and do you want it to be out there? And
as you're saying, if we say something, there are many people that think we represent the DGPT at times because we contract with them and we work very closely with them. When obviously, as I've always tried to say, if I'm saying something on a social media site or anything, it's my opinion. It's not the DGPT opinion, because I'm not even an employee, although we are very close with them and we're contractors. But many people don't see the division of lines and because they're very blurry in disc golf a lot of times, as we've stated with Nate, as we've stated with, how many different pools do I have my toes in, between fantasy and broadcasting and podcasting and DGPT, and everybody, if you're in this sport, you're a volunteer in something and helping out with something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would just maybe close that loop, and certainly you can ask more questions about Justin or whomever, but just to say once again, I'm not speaking for Justin. I'm just speaking from the organizational perspective, and the organizational perspective, is that, we value those members, and Justin was speaking, in my opinion, he was giving his personal opinion, and I don't think he was speaking on behalf of the PDGA or intended that. And so, that would be my take on that.
And certainly, and I think the world probably knows and hopefully agrees and can see that. The bigger question is, and rightfully so, the pushback is, even with that being said, even with that disclaimer,
he's still the board president.
He's still the board president, and he's still
can't
saying disparaging things.
You can't take that shirt off, whether you like it or not. You cannot take. Had he said something truly offensive, you can't take that shirt off. You are no matter where you go, we've said it before, you are still a representative of the PDGA. I will always be a representative of Smashbox. Mm-hmm. I will, regardless of how I look at it, I'm still slightly a representative of DGPT. They employ me. I work with and for them. You can't separate it. As much as great as it would be if you could just take that off and separate it, you can't.
And as Terry said, everybody has opinions. In disc golf, it feels like we are 20 times more passionate than any other sport, right? Even though that's not the case, but it feels like our opinions are magnified and we get passionate about issues. And, I care about our majors because I'm the chair of the majors committee, and it's a passion of mine. So when I see stuff happen, I have opinions, and certain things, rile me up, and I want to make it better. And so, we all have opinions. At the end of the day, as the board, we want to make sure that when we're talking, we clearly state if this is a personal opinion or the organizational perspective.
Maybe unless I think of more later. Last question on him and that conversation piece. Is there anything that's been issued? Do we anticipate it? A lot of people are calling for something formal from him, if not a resignation, some kind of official statement from the PDGA and or an official statement from Justin himself. Have we seen or heard anything that I haven't been made aware of?
Justin, he sent me something, and I've talked to Justin a couple times since Friday. I don't believe the organization is planning on putting out a statement at this time. If Justin chooses to put out a statement, I think he'll do that on his own page. But he did send me, something that he was considering, and, I'll let him make that decision if he wants to release something. But I can tell you that I've talked to him, and, and so I would just say something could be forthcoming, but I'm not I can't read his mind. So.
Okay. I don't know if we've, and I'm reading the chat, and I understand that no matter how we address this, we're even taking on a little risk ourselves tonight, because then people could accuse us of being an extension of the PDGA or
carrying
not
water
doing
for
this,
them,
and all of those types of things.
Well, anytime you give somebody a chance to speak their mind, you right away you are assuming people will make the assumption that you're defending or backing them up, that we are and again, we're pro PDGA in general, but that, we are supporting whatever was said by letting the PDGA speak their mind. And we can't stop that. People on the board, there's some on there, and that's fine. I think we need to move on to
the real reason for why the statements were made.
to the more recent, or maybe less recent, I don't know. Some of the other controversies that the PDGA has stepped in over the last, we'll say, 7 days.
Issues that have needed to be addressed.
The beginning, the driving range. Let's start there. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the tournament staff rented out half of the driving range. They used half of the driving range as a putting green and a driving range, I'm going to put that in quotes, to drive into nets. We've seen it in a lot of other events. You can throw as hard as you want into this net. You only have to walk 8 feet to get it. There was maybe it was just Brody. I don't know. Maybe it was other players that were complaining about the golfers being there on the other half of the driving range. So he went to, and we talked about this last week, he went to Mulligan's and basically paid for the other half of the driving range, which was about $1,000 for the day. And a lot of people commended him. I commended him myself. I said, that's great. That's your own money. And this is where we put Nate in an awkward position, because Nate's a Discraft sponsor player. Nate is Brody's a Discraft sponsor player. They're on the same team, but I know you're going to speak for yourself, or maybe the PDGA.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak for the PDGA. So, yep.
What is the right move? Because as whether or not Brody had ulterior motives or anything to do that, as far as, I don't want to say he did it to make the PDGA look bad, because I don't think that was his intention, but that's what happened. It makes the tournament staff and it makes the PDGA look like a bunch of chumps. Like, how come you couldn't? It's only $1,000. As I've seen on the internet, the PDGA makes millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, I know. I love that too. Why can't I just pay for the extra $3,000 or $4,000 to rent this out? And then when the PDGA did, apparently they offered Brody a refund, a stipend, whatever you want to call it, to pay him back, and he turned it down. And then so the PDGA then put that into the purse, which
then he challenged, asking, well, what do I have to do to get more money? If I pay for water, is more money going to go into the purse, and things like that. So from a PDGA perspective, Nate Heinold, what is the right move? Did the PDGA make it? And what can we do about it in the future?
Well, to answer your last question, the board, myself, Joe, and the event staff, they're already working on what went wrong with Worlds and how can we fix it. In fact, Joe has already sent a personal letter to every player who played Worlds to acknowledge where we fell short and to tell them that we're going to do better next time. And on the issue of the warm-up area, that setup was used at prior Utah Opens, the exact same setup with the driving range. And so the staff and the LOC, the local operating committee, I believe they made the same decision that they've had in the past, that this was adequate. And when, Brody, which he has every right, and we appreciated, him trying to make things better for our players. And so when he brought that up, we decided to rectify it. We did offer to reimburse him for that expense. And so certainly going forward, I think the players are demanding more practice, warm-up areas. And I believe that we're not going to make that mistake again as the PDGA. So the players, when they go to an event like Maple Hill or even Eureka or Brewster Ridge, they generally throw in a very small warm-up area with a net. So in the past, that's been more normal, even at our last 2 pro worlds, at Eureka and Brewster Ridge and Fox Run, which was 2018 and 19. That was all they got, to be honest. And I know that because I hosted one of them, and I 5-putted the 71st hole to miss the cut by 4 strokes.
Not that you're bitter.
Yeah. Don't make it personal, Nate. Come on.
You're speaking for the PDGA, not for Nate Heinold. Did the PDGA 5-putt? No, you did.
Nate Heinold did.
I just can't get that out of my head, though. Anyway, so that 5-putt notwithstanding, in the future, our checklists have been updated. I mean, right now, I'm already thinking, that we're not, we're going to use local parks next to the facility, a baseball field. We'll do whatever it takes to make sure we secure enough warm-up area. So the PDGA holds no ill will towards Brody for choosing to take that step to try to get more warm-up space, and everything else you said is factual. So
okay, so I would also, and I'm going to put this out there, I'm also in a unique position. I don't want to call it awkward. It's a unique position. I had conversations with people on the ground, tournament director type people and organizers, volunteers, staff members. I also had talked to PDGA staff throughout the week. And then I have a relationship with players. So I'm in a unique position that I've heard, of course, lots of things. Some things I feel are true, some things not, or the telephone game. So I want to disclose all of that. It sounds as if, exactly as you guys had described, Jade and crew had felt as if this area was, I think when it was all said and done, it was something like a 200 by 200 foot area, or 200, it was a 50 by 50 foot sections. And then there was also the park was right next to Mulligan's, where all of the edge skill shot and all those other things had taken place. And that was also considered a practice warm-up area. Now, I know you couldn't throw 500-foot drives on it because that extended almost the length of the park. I understand that. But I wanted to put it out there that it sounds as if it was thought about. It seems as if even though they did think about it, most people are saying, well, that wasn't sufficient enough. And so I want to put it on record that it's not like this wasn't thought of. And I did hear of a gentleman that was apparently hitting golf balls in the one of the bays that was supposed to be for disc golfers, and he was being a defiant golfer is what he was. He was over there in that area hitting golf balls, and eventually it sounded as if management had to remove him because this was a regular golfer that showed up that was basically being defiant and didn't want to move out of what was supposed to be the disc golfer space. So I want to provide a little bit of that perspective as well.
And my personal... Oh, go ahead, Nate. Nope.
No, you go ahead, Johnny.
I was going to say my personal opinion on this was that I thought that the nets were enough. We've been doing it for years that way. I know it sounds silly, and I'm going to get a ton of hate probably from pros, but if you need to throw a 400 or 500 foot drive and see what happens with your disc that late in the event, right before, you're out of luck. You probably don't know your disc length. You're not probably going to make the cut or catch. Well,
no, because they'll tell you they lost one in the water at Mulligan's, and therefore they had to get out their new driver, and they wanted to see if it flips over at 480 feet.
I understand, but it was... I don't want to say it was known, but this is what we've done in the past. Now, if this is different than what we're going to do in the future, that's fine. I can't wait for the complaints to come from next year or the year after when the driving range is 2 miles from the course and people are complaining that they have to drive and get in their car to drive back to the course to drive. So I'm going to head those off right here at the bend and just say this isn't the last we're going to hear about it, but that's a personal opinion. Right from Johnny V, not from Smashbox TV.
You're going to get us in trouble.
And I would say, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Brody or any player, but in general, the message I got from players myself wasn't specifically the driving range issue. It was more of a consistency from event to event on the elite level. Mm-hmm. I mean, the driving range issue, as Johnny just mentioned and Terry mentioned, I'm going to leave that where you guys said it. However, maybe that was brought up because of consistency issues. Whatever it is, the PDGA is looking to address that for future, iterations of this event to make sure that as the players go from elite event to elite event, whether it's DGPT or PDGA owned, that they see a very similar, setup.
So let's get into that specifically about, we'll say, consistency from event to event. Quickly, if you could, describe how anyone, yourself included, Utah, the U.S. women's crew, whomever, how the major bid process is actually is become more and more of a scrutinized, thorough process, is it not? Kind of give us the bullet points to it to host an event of this magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, and thinking back to the bids that we received for 2020 Pro Worlds, which was 2021 Pro Worlds because of the COVID pushback, So those bids were 50 to 60 pages long, and they go to the events team and they scrutinize them and then provide the board with a 25-page write-up to give us scores and grades and feedback, and the event staff is following up with the local teams to drill down on parking areas, spectator plans, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I mean, right now, I think we have bids due on or around the end of November, and I'm confident that people are already working on writing them now. And so it's a very comprehensive process. After all that happens, the board then votes which event to select.
And that includes specific people that that's essentially their job is to do this, and then to work with the organizing committee, the LOC, local organizing committee, to then ensure the to see all of these things out. Whether
yep.
Weeks leading into it, and then once on the ground. So I'm going to lead to the next point, which was there was a lot of challenge and criticism over if OB lines should have been painted at either course. I guess specifically Mulligan's is where it happened, but if the OB lines and hazards and water hazards should have been painted before the event, and then when they were painted after everyone had played a single round at Mulligan's, it sounded as if the PDGA was trying to rectify something, but it almost received more criticism than maybe not having them in the first place. Where does that stand?
No, I would say that's a fair criticism. The PDGA dropped the ball here is the bottom line. So, we did site visits with Utah. We had phone calls. We take responsibility for this issue. It certainly, our plan is for this not to happen again, because the bottom line is OB should be marked before the event, and then we should be leaving it alone. And that's the organization's opinion, and it also happens to be my personal opinion that once the event is started, if I missed an OB line as a PDJ marshal or a course setup person, at the end of the day, it should be left alone. And so the goal going forward is we're going to make sure the OB lines are set when people are practicing and the course is done and the course is ready to go. In this case, the PDJ took feedback during practice rounds, and we did some trimming and we did some other, clarifications. We took additional feedback after the tournament had started, and then lines were painted. We had feedback from players. In hindsight, the organization's opinion is that shouldn't have happened, and we do apologize that after the event started, we had marked some OB lines.
It felt like one step forward and two steps back, because listening to the live broadcast, when the women played Mulligan's, Paige Pierce walked up to one of these shots in the thing, and she out loud said, "I shouldn't have to make this call." Like that was her exact phrasing. So then the PDGA goes and paints the lines, which in hindsight, clearly not a great idea. Nobody thinks it's good. But it speeds up play, of which we saw backups, because it's much clearer, and it takes the awkwardness away from the player to make that call. So while it's good in concept and it's good on multiple other levels, the perception of the OB lines and the course changing halfway through the tournament really put a big damper on that perspective. But I mean, from the live perspective, it was way better for us because it moved the course along faster. You didn't have people sitting there for 5 minutes looking at blades of grass.
Yeah, I feel as if, and maybe Nate, you can finalize the point, but when they were put down, it was also made clear that it was not consulted with the event staff. I don't know if they were done at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. It was like rogue ninjas, OB ninjas out there. Maybe Mike Sullivan or others had run out, and obviously they got. I know they had to go to multiple hardware stores. They cleared them out of all the correct kind of paint and went out and put these down. But then the criticism also arose because some people felt as if they weren't tight enough to some of the original OB areas. So there was certainly a few shots that may have found themselves barely or inbounds on round 1, but by round 3 or 4 or whatever it was, they found themselves out of bounds. Now, clearly no one wants to ever be that close to any of the OBs, but a few shots that were inbounds in one area may not have been a few days later. I think unfortunately that kind of magnified this the entire instance.
It certainly did, and as I said, the PDJ takes responsibility for that. I know the event staff and Joe are working on updating our checklists as we speak to say, this kind of situation as we use more ball golf courses. Should we be marking those sand traps and greens? Is it clear enough? I can tell you that we're working on making sure that doesn't happen again. We take responsibility. That is certainly our bad, our bogey, whatever you want to call it. We screwed up. And we're going to make it, moving forward, we're going to make sure we don't make that mistake again.
So that brings me to the next question. If we're going to be staying at ball golf courses, another big complaint was having to pay for practice rounds at Mulligan's. Is that something that's added to the checklist? Are we looking at renting out? If we're going to have these courses at golf courses, do we expect the players to pay a couple $100 for the week of? I mean, I have to assume that to play on that golf course was probably $10 a round minimum. I don't know, 5, 10, 20, whatever it is. You want to get 5, 6, 7 rounds in. That's going to add up very quickly. Is this something the PDGA is going to address?
That's a great question. I would say that we can look into that. It's not something that we've talked about with the majors committee. So without me giving my personal opinion, I would say that you're making a very valid point. Specifically at Ledgestone, we do cover the FPO rounds and their greens fees. And I think that I'm adding it to my list as we speak to bring up to the event staff to say that should be discussed. And to answer your question, I think we'll look into that because we don't want players to have to pay exorbitant fees for practice rounds. However, obviously we have to respect the fact that if we're renting golf courses in some areas, the cost of, Mulligan's may be X, but the cost of a golf course in San Francisco could be $10,000 a day or whatever it is. And so,
Yeah. And I think that has to go into part of the bid.
It may not be a one size fits all, but it could be definitely part of the bid process where if you're going to use a golf course, we need to know the details of how much is it going to cost players? Do they get a golf cart? Look, if it's $10 and you get a golf cart, I'm not sure any player is going to complain about that. But if it's $70 and you're walking.
Anytime you're going to take money out of somebody's pocket, they're going to complain. And it's not. This isn't a pro thing. This is a general.
If you're walking during the tournament and we're giving you a golf cart, I guess is my point. That So I think that's a good thing to look at.
Well, and I'll just expand that. We all just use the preface of golf courses. We've seen some people make comments and say, hey, there's not dedicated space here just in general. We could be in a public park. I know that was a criticism of the U.S. Women's as, hey, we're out here in a public park. It's Monday. Our event starts on Wednesday or Thursday. Should we have specific access to this public park on these certain days? And then I'll expand that and say, should we have to pay the greens fee? Maybe it's $2 or $3 at this public park. Or this pay-to-play course. Should we have to pay this $2 to $5 to $10 parking fee at this public or pay-to-play course? Those are all, and then I think the ultimate question on top of all of those is how far out? What's the right amount? Because you and I, we all know some players are going to be there on Sunday for an event that might not start till Thursday, and some players are going to be there a week in advance. Some players are going to be there just 2 days in advance, and they're not even going to see any of it.
72 hours that the course has to be set up prior to the event, or is it more than that? I think it depends on the tier of the course. Or
it does.
Tier of the event. So
those are all things that I just want to get out there and say. I feel like if you say, okay, 4 days in advance, you're on your own. 3 days in advance, here's what we cover. 2 days in advance, here's what we cover or don't. Those are all part of this conversation.
I would say I've already seen emails between our U.S. women's host and the event staff, and I believe the courses are being closed in more advanced time than we've done in the past. And I know that we're going to look into that issue for the PDJ-owned majors to make sure that the players have adequate practice time. So,
Madison. All right, so we have about 15 minutes left here before we really need to wrap this up to get to some really cool guests.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Not that you're not. Not that you're not.
No,
you just have 0 world titles.
That's true.
And we've got 3 waiting for our next podcast.
One of the big questions that is being asked is, what does the PDGA do for the touring pros? Like, what is the we've seen them talk about unionizing and boycotting and all this other things, and you know, I'll take all those with a grain of salt, or a block of salt, thank you, not just a grain. From your perspective, what does the PDGA do for the touring pros?
Well, for many years, we've obviously run the national tour. We've hosted 39, I think, Pro World Championships. We, support the USDGC, the US Women's event. We definitely support the Disc Golf Pro Tour. We had a record amount of added cash this year at Pro Worlds, a record number of rounds covered, of media representation, photographers, videographers. So in terms of, the membership fee for pros is $75. I feel like the PDGA gives a lot of value. Certainly, the DGP to the PDGA is an apples and oranges comparison. The PDGA is a membership organization with 90,000 members and many, many, many more amateurs than professionals. The DGPT is a phenomenal organization, and their main mission is to present a tour for 150 professional players. And so different organizations, but in terms of specifically for the touring pros, I think that's really what the PDGA has done or is doing.
I'll follow that one up and say some of the additional criticism or comments that we hear often from our pros has been that the Disc Golf Pro Tour is killing it. They're doing a great job. There's a ton of media. There's a lot of post-production. There's live, of course, which is committed to it. And some people have said, well, why isn't the Disc Golf Pro Tour just taking over our largest events and essentially facilitating the largest events? And whether it's the majors or the national tours and how those all kind of coincide or whatever. Is that on the table? Is that a logical conversation, or are they just going to continue to be two parallel but yet agreeable organizations that work in tandem?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's the timing of me answering that question has nothing to do with Pro Worlds, to be honest. Just because this discussion has been going on since before I was on the board of directors, to be honest. And my first board meeting, or my first summit, Steve Dodge was there and pitched this to the PDGA when he started the Pro Tour. He tried to get this to happen, and it didn't work out. And so the PDGA has a phenomenal relationship with the Disc Golf Pro Tour and with Todd and Jeff. And I can tell you that the PDGA's mission and to promote, grow, sustain the sport aligns with a lot of what the Disc Golf Pro Tour is doing. And I would say those discussions are certainly happening.
Yeah, the big thing that you always see is everybody saying, not everybody, the vocal people saying that the PDGA should just drop out of the pro game, focus on the amateurs. And I have mixed questions about that, because I need people to define what a pro is.
Yeah.
Terry Miller, you could go to an event next weekend and play pro.
I'm a pro.
Are you really a pro? Just saying, like, what they say and what they mean are going to be two different things, because
Sure.
they don't. I mean, they do understand, but maybe they don't think about it when they say it. I think what they really mean is that they should get out of the touring pros. They should get out of the elite series. They should get out of the DGPT. Maybe focus on the majors. Maybe hand those off. I don't know. I can't say what they think. I don't necessarily buy into that. I think that the PDGA has a very good purpose and do a lot for our touring pros, but that mileage varies.
I just want to throw this out there because I know it's a common question. Also, is people say, where does my money go? And there's so much money in the PDGA. So let me first of all tackle. You can literally Google where does my PDGA membership money go, and like a separate sheet opens up and will tell you right on the PDGA page. So literally Google the words, where does my PDGA membership go, or what does my PDGA membership get me? And it'll bring you to the PDGA page that has a whole bunch of things. So let me put that out there. But secondly, Nate, you're a numbers guy. You always have been. one of the number one thing that gets thrown around in the wake of this driving range conversation and in the wake of 100,000 or whatever getting added to Pro Worlds, people always say, but there's $8 million that the PDGA has. Why isn't all that money going into our purses? Can you, because I'll continue to say it in a condescending voice, could you politely explain to people that a nonprofit business doesn't just blow $8 million every year and then expect to refill the coffers? Like, that's not how business works.
Yeah, I mean, basically, when COVID hit last year, we had a certain amount of dollars in our in reserves, and we were expecting disaster, to be honest, and we prepared for that, and fortunately, that didn't happen with our sport, and so yeah, the PDJ does not bring in $8 million of profit per year. We certainly do have reserves set aside for a rainy day fund because we do have, just since COVID has started, we've hired new staff. In fact, right now I'm looking at the data, I think we're hiring for 3 positions. We have over 100 applicants for those positions. The PDJ staff has grown immensely as our organization has seen massive growth, near 100% since COVID started. And so the PDJ doesn't bring in, that much money per year in terms of the millions of dollars that you referenced. We do certainly have money in reserve as a rainy day fund, but we're a nonprofit organization. We can't, we are prudent with our finances. We don't invest. I mean, we don't have investments all over the world. We have we're very strategic in, what we do with our funds to make sure that if something does happen, that we have the funds to continue the operations of the organization. So
if somebody wants to know more, and again, I hear this thrown around, so I want to hear it from you personally because the questions get thrown around all the time. If they want to know more about the budget, the finances, all of that type of stuff, the now annual audits that take place, or that have been taking place forever, where can people get more information rather than just spouting off and having really no clue what they're talking about? Because that's usually where they start, and then I feel like we try to direct them. People try to direct them, but where can people absorb that information and then hopefully have some understanding of it?
Yeah, if you go to the PDJ site and if you just even go to the top right corner in the search button, you can type in the word financial audit, actually, and you're going to see the most recent audit posted. In fact, you can also type in the word budget, I believe, and you're going to see somewhere there, you're probably going to have to be more specific than that, I guess, but you can definitely see our audit. You can see certain financial statements that we have to release as a nonprofit organization, but under the search tab, you can find it, and you can also find it under the, I believe if you go to more and then documents, it's there. So we do provide, in fact, yeah, if you type in 2019 budget, you can scroll down and see the 2018 financial audit, the 19 financial audit, and then our budget summary from 19, which is, I believe, our most recent year, probably. So.
Yeah, and again, I know I gave my cocky voice there for a moment, but that is one of the most frustrating things for me, and it has nothing to do with whether I did or don't support the PDGA. It's so lazy for anyone to constantly complain when there's a lot of answers out there. A Google search more often than not will bring you to a lot of the answers. And if you need to drill in further, there's people to connect with. There's ways to do that rather than just blindly spouting off. And that's not specific to disc golf or the PDGA, but I've been around the block a long time, and that does irritate the heck out of me, is seeing that over
and I can
over.
also say that when the board approves the budget, it's generally something close to break even is how we're trying to budget the organization. We're not trying to make this huge profit, and in some years that certainly happens. We can't always predict the next disc golf, boom and all of these members signing up. And so the goal is not to run a large profit. It's to fulfill the mission of the organization. So.
Well, I invite everyone to go out and read up and research. I think it's just, I'll use the word again, it's just lazy, I think, for so many people to just jump on the bandwagon of simply bashing or making assumptions. if there's something you dislike, run for the board. Talk to your state coordinator. Talk to the potential board candidates. Maybe you don't want to run for the board, but you feel like you really align with someone that is running for the board. It's just like anything else. You need to go out and speak your mind with the right people to actually have your voice heard, because just yelling it on Twitter and Facebook is useless, and all it's going to do is rally the troops to get a lot of other like-minded people to get them worked up. But the problem is, if nobody does something about it, it's not going to go anywhere. And I'm all for change if that's what's needed. So I'm not dismissing, people making, complaints, but do something with those. Constructive criticism goes so much further than just simply screaming with your keyboard.
And I would just say one more quick point. Since we resumed sanctioning in May of 2020, we've seen 74% membership growth, 99.7% sanctioned event growth, 150% league growth. We've seen astronomical numbers, in terms of new players and all of these things. And so the PDGA is growing rapidly. We're adding new staff. We're scaling up to meet the demands of our members, to be honest. And we haven't increased member dues. And so we're doing a lot of things that may not always be public. The PDGA scoring app. If people think that we spent $5,000 to develop that, that's missing a lot of numbers, to be honest. And so that kind of stuff is expensive, but very valuable to our members.
So I feel like the pro game is clearly the most visible aspect of our sport. What is the PDGA doing, or not doing? That's a bad way to put it. What's on the PDGA agenda for the pro game? What are you guys looking at doing to improve it? What are you looking at, whether it's something like you said, tournament checklists and things, and all that stuff is great for tournaments, but what is the PDGA looking to do to improve the pro game?
Yeah, I would say Justin is our PDGA board president. He sets the agenda for our summits. Our next summit, our in-person summit, is literally in 3 weeks, right before DGLO. And we have on the agenda significant time for the tour and for our majors, as far as I'm aware from Justin. And he's committed to making that discussion happen. In fact, right now, I threw an idea to the board and Joe to have an open session for touring players to come to the summit, and we're working on trying to solidify that. So we're willing to listen to the players, but I will tell you that at our next summit, our first in-person summit since COVID happened, so our first in-person summit in almost 2 years, to be honest, we have a significant amount of time set aside to discuss majors and our tour. And I know Jeff Spring will be there from the Pro Tour. I'll be running the event and will be there myself, and our board will be there, and Joe will be there. And I know Joe is, ready to listen, and he's been talking to players. I've been talking to players. I'm confident the rest of our board has, Elaine, Jeff, and Laura, and Justin, and Bob. And so I'm very confident that we're going to listen, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that the players have a consistent approach at these majors and the events that we control.
All right, now let me flip it on you. Why, as an amateur, why am I paying money into the pro purse? I'm never going to play those events. What do I gain from that, Nate?
When you say you're paying into the pro purse, I guess I'm not.
I mean, I'm paying my PDGA membership every year. In fact, for the next 3 years, I have prepaid. Why should my money go into that pro purse for Pro Worlds? I mean, the PDGA dropped. I'm not saying the PDGA alone, because we know Jade Sewell raised a lot of money, but the PDGA put money into the Pro Worlds. They put money into USDGC. They put money in the USWDGC. They helped sponsor some of the DGPT. Why should my money go there?
Yeah, they give it to Marco Polo. I'm not going to Puerto Rico to play disc golf.
I mean, that's again, that's the question flipped on its head. You said yourself, we are a majority. I mean, you're talking 99% will never touch a pro tour. They'll never come close to it. Why should our money go there? I would say,
the amateur membership fee is $50. The professional is $75. And I know it's not strictly for that reason, but that extra $25 is a significant amount of money. If you do that math times the number of professional players, it's several $100,000. And so we don't put that much money in terms of the added cash into those 3 events. But I will say to the amateurs that would say that, we have the scoring app, and we have Tournament Manager that we've developed, and we have the relationship with UDisc and the 50% discount for the DGN and ratings. If people think ratings are free, that costs us a lot of money to generate those, and running sanctioned events and the technology behind being able to provide that product and having the staff to support that. We're hiring more staff. We hired, as you just said, Sully. He's TD support. We have another position open for events coordinator. So all of those things are designed to make the membership experience better, the tournament experience better. And so for $50, you're really getting a great value to play as many tournaments as you want to play.
Okay, thanks.
The ability to go play AM Worlds and US Amateur, and AM Worlds is a big deal for a lot of our AM players. And so I think we spend a lot of money on Pro Worlds, but we spend a lot of money on AM Worlds.
Well, and just to
for the record, I was just flipping it out. I think I don't care personally where my money goes. I feel like the PDGA is doing a good job in budgeting for whatever they're budgeting for. They haven't raised dues and in a long time. So, but I thought it was a question that needed to be asked.
Yeah, and to as we wrap this up, to put it a little bit in perspective, when I signed up, I think we officially had 1.5 staff members of the PDGA. That was Brian Henniger, Guru, and his wife, who I think was deemed "quote unquote" a half employee because she worked part time. It was 1.5. Obviously, IDGC came along in 2006. That was a huge step, upwards of like 5 or 6 staff members. I think we're at 23 paid staff members of the PDGA right now. Nate, maybe you can correct me, but 23 paid staff members, hiring more people, and then a board that is all unpaid, which most people also don't realize. I'm not gaslighting for the PDGA here. I'm just saying there's a lot of things going on that most people just simply never bother to investigate or realize that are also happening. There's a lot more to it. So I invite everyone to educate themselves as well, just a little bit more. There's a lot of resources out there. Google's your friend. It really is.
Yeah, and I would just close and say the PDGA is not looking for sympathy. We're just looking for, as I said, what we've talked about tonight. We acknowledge where we fell short. We can talk about the positives that happened at Worlds with the added cash and all of the volunteer hours spent, on that venue and that bid. And so at the end of the day, we're improving. We're looking to improve. We want member feedback. We want to listen to our members, and we plan on continuing to do that.
I think part of that, this is the obligatory, well, not so obligatory. This is the offer that we continue to say, and we will always offer, is that Smashbox TV, although zero compensation from the PDGA comes our way, and we're glad, we're more than happy to admit that. And as a separate independent entity that we are, the PDGA, if ever, has plans, initiatives, updates, stories, whatever the case might be, we're always happy to provide a platform and to help share the goods and the bads. I mean, I feel really good about a lot of the things that I think have been addressed here tonight. There's obviously going to be continuing issues, both good and bad, that will move on from here. But if there's ever a time the PDGA and or representatives, any board members, any employees ever have anything, you guys are always welcome here on Smashbox, and we're glad to work through them. And I do want to say one final thing to all of that, Nate. I also want to say, besides thanking all of our board members and all of the staff members that I know work really long hours at Worlds and at other events and outside of the events, Jade and Rob and the crew at the PDGA Worlds was incredible. And I know they took a lot of heat, and some of it I feel was very fair. Some of it I feel wasn't, but they did an incredible job at the end of the day when it was all said and done. And I feel like we all have learned, and we can all grow. And with the growth of the sport and the growth of the PDGA and an open mind, I think all of us can learn from this and move forward. So
Nate, thanks for coming on the podcast and representing the PDGA. We do appreciate your time. It's 9:06 our time currently. So, sorry, we need to put our glasses back on. So on that note, we need to get you out of here so we can get some world champions on the line.
We do. Nate, seriously, thank you so much. We do appreciate the insight. We appreciate, like you said, the PDGA perspective. We all know no one is perfect. We make plenty of mistakes here at Smashbox. PDGA, I do believe, is out there. They're listening, and certainly encourage everyone to write in, call in, and share your opinions. And maybe most importantly, right now, in just a couple days, place your vote.
Yes.
Go out there.
Yes.
Ballots are going to be available. They're coming into your inbox come July 1st. You have an entire month to vote. We've had abysmal turnout. I think it's been like 11 or 14% of our active membership. Go out and vote, people. That's the first place where it all starts. So Nate, thanks for joining us. Let's talk again soon.
Of course.
Please give our PDJ congratulations to both James and Katrina. So
we will, and we'll probably talk to you again when Ledgestone comes closer to fruition. I bet there's some discs.
Oh yeah.
So
all right,
Nate, what discs are there? Oh, I'm sorry, I cut him off. I didn't get a chance to. He didn't get a chance to tell us all about the discs that we're going to drop for Ledgestone.
Well, he's got to pay our marketing and advertising fees for those. All right, guys, we are going to cut it now.
Yep.
We didn't answer everything. Nate couldn't possibly answer everything. We're not solving all of the world's problems in one hour podcast, but I really do applaud Nate and the PDGA who wanted an opportunity to, I think publicly, admit to a few of the L's that they took, a few challenges. I commend that. Of course, none of us are perfect, and it was good hearing a little more explanation. All we can do is continue to grow and hopefully move forward. So as we said, thank you guys for listening. Very unique, special podcast. Maybe we need to have more of these more often so we can go over more specific details as they're happening. We're glad to do so if you guys want to continue to listen in. We encourage you to stay right here, essentially on Smashbox TV. We're going to come back in just a few moments. We're going to start a new stream. We're going to have Katrina Allen. Then we're going to have James Conrad. We're going to talk to both of our world champs. I'm sure they're not worried about a painted line right now. All they're worried about is those world championship titles.
I do want to say I am really, really glad that we did this before, because that half the time we don't even have to address it with them then. Like, how did you feel about the... No, we're not talking to them about that. We're going to talk to them about their accomplishments.
That's what matters. For Johnny V and myself, Terry Miller, the disc golf guy, Nate Heinold, representing the PDGA, of which we're all proud members. Thank you guys for joining us for the special podcast. We'll see you with our world champs in just a few minutes when you step inside the Smashbox.